My name is Ketan. I'm the CEO of UnionAI. I intermittent fast, so I have coffee black every morning, just like a shot of espresso with hot water in it.
Welcome back to the MLOps Community Podcast. I am your host, Demetrios. Today we're talking with Ketan, and we have a special guest host, Steven, who is not here with me to do the normal banter of the intro, but he jumps in about 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes into the conversation. You will notice that he is there asking questions. It's very special because he is a user of Flyte. He works at Volt, the delivery service, and we actually did a podcast specifically with him recently, so go check it out. And he is an avid user of the Flyte platform, and he built the ML platform at Volt with Flyte. So I thought it was only right that we get him to come on here and chat with Ketan and really dive into some of these questions that we had. With Ketan, oh man, this is like his third time on, and I enjoy talking to him every time he comes on, especially because he talked about some things that he didn't necessarily talk about a lot in the first 2 times on, which are how he feels building a startup. You know, he left Lyft after building out the platform there, and he decided to start Union, which is what Flyte is based on. And he really talked about building Union, being a company builder, and then he also talked about how they differentiate between what features need to go into Flyte, the open source project, and what features he feels needs to go into Union. I thought it was fascinating looking at the differences there and how he felt and how he prioritizes one over the other, because Flyte has this gigantic community around it. It's doing some great things, and a lot of people are asking for certain features, and Ketan has to field these features and say, is the product going to go in that direction? Are we going to invest resources into the open source product having these capabilities, or are we going to create these capabilities inside of Union? And the long and short of it was that when he's thinking about creating features inside of Union, it is because they are more enterprise use case features. I can't knock him for it. You gotta get those enterprises happy. They're the ones that are paying the bills. So I understand how that works. This conversation was great though, because it's rare that you get someone who is an avid user of a tool alongside of the creator of the tool to get a little banter going back and forth. Hope you all enjoy this podcast with Ketan and my co-host Steven. And if you like it, or you know someone else that would like it, it would mean the world to me if you share it with a friend. Let's get into it. And a huge shout out to Union and Ketan for being a sponsor of the MLOps community. They've been one of the first sponsors that we've ever had. And so it is from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. For anyone that is looking to get some of them pipelining tools, hit up Ketan, just tag him in the Slack or check the link in the description. Get yourself started with Flyte. It is fully open source. Or if you're that enterprise use case, go ahead and drop him a line and tell him you want to give him a boatload of money. See ya. Ketan, man, this is your 3rd time on the show. I don't know of many people that have been offered the ability to come back. Not 1 time, but 2 times. So this is a huge accomplishment. And
I am humbled.
we can only reserve it for someone like yourself, man. It is an absolute honor, as always, to have you on here. And today, I want to talk about so much. I mean, one of the last times that you were on here, we went down a huge rabbit hole talking all about orchestration. I want to go back down that rabbit hole and hear what's changed since the last time you were here, because large language models came out and that boom happened. But I also want to know, like, we talked a lot about Airflow and how Airflow isn't enough last time. I want to retouch on some of that stuff. And I was doing a little bit of research for this episode, and I went back and I listened to some of the snippets from the last time that we talked, so I may put you on the spot and hold you to some of the stuff that you said. But
share these points before the hand.
dude, I'm going to call out the elephant in the room, which is you've had a company now for 2.5 years. You are a founder. You're full-on startup founder. How's it feel?
That's a great question. I actually, I was talking to my wife the other day, and I told her it may not work, it may fail, but I still would be happy. At 50, when I look back, I'll be like, hey, I did something cool. I tried building a crazy product. I tried building a company. I tried building a community. I aged like 10 years during that period, but, it's like, was it Steve Jobs or Jeff Bezos, I think, regret minimization. And I think that's what probably I feel like I minimize my regret. I literally think that we, especially in the tech industry, we sometimes go, in the last decade, I've seen excess. And it's very easy to get caught in that excess. And when I started the company, I told my wife, we're probably not going to make any money. And
High
she was like,
expectations,
crazy. That is nuts. But I did started to make money. I started to actually try and do something really different. And it took guts, and I had to dig deep, and I was able to. So, and I'm continuing to, which is fantastic. I still want to come in every day and do more, which is why I look forward to, and I'm fortunate to have done this also. Of course, I've been very lucky. Yeah, I think this is the best experience of my life.
Dude, so you set the expectations high with your wife so that it wouldn't be too hard to break them. I'm imagining you guys have made some money. And so she's already probably very happy for you.
No, yeah, we worked for 10 years, so we're okay, right? That's the other thing. We live with minimal stuff, and we are happy. But yeah, when I look back, I realize that many people are still stuck, and that's how we hire too. We're like, if you just come up to me and say like, hey, it's all about compensation, it's like, startup's not for you.
No, go find a job at one of the big FANG companies.
And there are great jobs. Again, nothing against that. Again, that's the right thing for you to do in the right stage of your life. You should know it. If you know it, don't do it for the money. Do it for having a fun ride.
Yeah. So you're on this ride now, man. You've built quite the community with Flyte. And I want to hear about how that has been, because me as a community guy, and especially in the ML space, what have you noticed since open sourcing Flyte back in the day, and then getting crazy ML engineers like Steven to come and start using it, and all of it in between? Yeah. This is like the Rocky cutscene right now. You're in it.
Oh my God. I think communities are harder to build than a company, to be honest. It's like companies need money to do almost anything. Communities don't need money. Communities need passion and love. If you join the Slack and still ask a question, I will still be answering. And you'll probably see me answering all the time. And that's really, I don't know what we did. What we did is we did not build a toy in open source. We did not lie to the community. We consistently tried to improve it. And we tried to help where we can. Yes, there were people who had different expectations, and those people did not join the community, but most of the people who stayed on, hopefully I've been happy, and I've talked to them consistently with some of the earlier folks, and they're still using, they're still happy, they're still looking forward, they still want to move on, and it's growing. And it's going from one company to another. And the best sign of the community that I've had is when a person leaves a company A and they goes to me and like, hey, I missed this product. Can you please add this to this company? And that's been happening consistently now, like a lot of times. So, and it's slower growth, probably because it's organic, but it's more rooted growth. It's growth that sustains.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I can talk from my point of view here is that when I joined Flyte, Slack channel, actually, it was very nice, and people had a lot of empathy as well, and people were taking the time as well to explain things, even things that might be simple for you, Ketan, for example. Still take the time to explain it. The Flyte community has a lot of empathy, and is also like understanding to be like, yeah, those are people behind it, and yeah, they are trying to build something. So
yeah, and then what we realize is the type of people who come in, right? And it is a range, right? People who have played with Kubernetes, people who have not played with Kubernetes, people who are experts in certain fields like ML, but do not know anything about data engineering. People who are data engineers who are trying to become ML engineers, and so it's a huge mix. Like some people have never even tried Docker, right? And then they'll come and ask us like, how do we do it? So we ended up building like certain things like image spec. That was essentially to answer or help folks who do not know this and still get the maximum out of it. What we have learned is that in community, you don't choose, right? It's not like, again, in a company, you can choose who you work with. In a community, you don't initially. And probably you don't want to, because you want that diverse perspective. If that misses out, you are getting one-dimensional feedback, and that one-dimensional feedback will potentially put you in the wrong place.
It's an echo chamber. Yeah, that's such a good point. I mean, one thing that you mentioned there is that people are coming from every angle, and one angle that they're coming from is the data engineering angle. And I imagine they're very much thinking, hey, I'm going to run this ML orchestration just like I do my regular ETL. What happens then?
Yeah, it's fun. Then they say, where is the backfill button? I'm like, okay, hold on. What's a backfill? Why is that there no time always existent? And I'm like, okay, time is relative and time is not.
You turn into the philosopher. Ketan, you all of a sudden you're like, shit, I didn't know I had to go down that road. I'm going to have to put on my white beard and start...
Yes, no, but you're absolutely right. Actually, I still keep on finding people who expect it to do, let's say, what Airflow did or something else does, and we're like, but it is its own product, right? You have to give it its own merit. Like, for example, you cannot just ship like massive models that are being trained and pipelines to these products. Similarly, you probably cannot do time on Flyte. That's because we think of time as just a parameter. We think time is an axis, especially in the ML world. You're back testing, you're running as of scenarios, you're checking your hypothesis. When you're checking your hypothesis, you want to be able to play with anything, play with time, play with data, play with models, play with ideas, play with code. So that's like the user first philosophy that we have, and the user is experimenting in 90% of scenarios when they're testing and building any product that uses ML and data, right? Because you don't know if this is ever going to reach a customer. When I first talked to a data scientist or a machine learning engineer or even a data engineer who's building a product nowadays that reaches a customer, and tell them what is the likelihood that a customer will see it, like, it's 50-50 in the beginning. And then as you prove it, it becomes higher and higher. So that's a different modality of operation. And I think we have seen massive diversions in the data and the ML communities. And it is sad because ML communities cannot survive without data. Many of the data engineers that exist today will have to start building data products, in my opinion. And every product will have, like ML, when ML is infused, it's actually getting data infused in some way. So you have to start relying, like it's not okay to go and delete a table and just backfill it, right? That's not okay from any point of view, because you've probably made a decision that changed the outcome. Let's say, for example, you go to a bank and it denies you a loan. And then next day you go to the same bank and you talk to them, the customer service, and they say, like, hold on, I can see the loan is approved. You're going to be angry, but you won't be able to prove your point. And so when you go back and they'll be like, okay, let me go back to the system and check it out. And it turns out that there was some data corruption in the top and you deleted it. and you don't know what it was, and now you're like, okay, I made some bad decisions in my life, and you can't even regret about it. So that's how I think about it. Like, we all have to start thinking in a little different modality, and it'll take time, right? This is the reality of the world, and that means we have to keep on shifting that mindset.
Turns out that the model that was powering your loan scoring was actually ChatGPT, and
it hallucinated.
It gives you a different answer every time. So just keep applying, and you may get lucky.
Yeah. Oh wow. Yeah. That's dangerous. I don't want to be in a banking system that does that.
Yeah, totally. Well, you said something really good there that I think is worth noting too, which is a lot of these ML products, they have, I think 50-50 is a very generous number to give people. When you're exploring and you're trying to figure it out, you're just trying to see what's going on. How can we hopefully get some value from this? But you have to really push the limits of what you think is possible and go down dead ends that you don't realize are dead ends until 2 or 4 weeks later.
Yeah, I'll tell you an example, but also the 50-50s from the user, from the ML engineer's perspective or the data scientist perspective. They think they're going to hate it, right?
Yeah.
I have talked to a bunch of them. Again, nothing against, but it's like, the optimism in a human. But the reality is that there are 5 other data scientists at the same time working on potentially the same problem from a different axis. There was a data scientist who built this amazing model, which was like, RNNs were hot a short time ago. And it was very complex, extremely complex. And it was hard, but it showed value in some limited testing. But to productionize it takes a while. And we went down the rabbit hole and it did not prove any value, absolutely nothing, right?
So,
in production. So, it's not even 50. At that point, we were 70-30, almost all of us like, oh, this seems amazing. We looked at the model, I'm like, what a genius insight. And it seems like it, but it proves that it did not work. Like another example that I actually typically give that I worked on as one of the first things is real-time traffic, right? So in ETAs, we were trying to use real-time traffic. ETAs are estimated time of arrival that Lyft would give when you want to get a ride. And we were like, I think traffic will play a very, very critical role here. Because everywhere there's a lot of traffic, and that will change the ETS dramatically, and we can bring down our RMSE and MAEs. And so let's try that out. And how do you prove it? Like, it kind of simulated a little bit. I tried it out, and it's like, maybe. So, but real-time traffic is a big challenge.
Yeah.
You have to get data real time, process it, analyze it. It was all code. Some of the code was in C++ because the routing engines were in C++. We were like loading things, and this takes like 6 months of effort to do this stuff, right? And that time we didn't even have Flyte thing. And one of the reasons why Flyte kind of works with any language is because of that stuff, right?
You're scarred in the beginning.
Yeah, and what it turns out is that thankfully we didn't invest in like real-time ML, as I've heard many times, because firstly, the speed at which you go causes a lot of aberrations, right? Like, think about this. There is one car that stops that we have a sample for. We think there's huge traffic jam, but potentially turns out that was just a stoplight, or it's just like, that person decided to stop for a little bit.
Drop it off there.
Or whatever, right? Like,
yeah.
And you don't want to change like the ETS. It's just dramatically fluctuate the ETS up and down. It doesn't matter. So you have to put a damper. You have to put like a bunch of other models. And it turns out the hourly predictions for a week are so good that the bias adjustment is what the traffic does only, like a little bit of addition, so that it improves the tail problems. It doesn't really cause a huge deviation in the center. So that's what we found. And you're like, okay, people are saying, well, let's do real time. And this is the most real time kind of a scenario that you can think of, like fraud, right? Like even in fraud, if one person does a fraud, you don't want immediately to react to it. Like saying that, all right, this everybody else who's doing like everybody's loan should be rejected. I'm like, no, dude, that guy was probably a one-off case, right? So you want to wait for a little bit, buffer it up, dampen it out. And then, so a 10-minute interval is what we found pretty good. So things like that. Like, you learn only when you try, and you don't know the real outcomes till you really put it in production.
Damn, I have to think about that. So I'm actually working on a project similar to that now. So maybe I'll be like, we don't need real-time ML here.
No, try smart. Try go faster, and then speed it up. It's easier to prove value every time you go up.
Yeah.
And at some point you'll be like, hey, the next step is so hard that the ROI on it is like, it's not quantifiable. So
Yeah. But also I hear a lot, like, from like all meetups and everyone. Like everyone is always like, oh, I want real-time machine learning all the time. And then you always ask the question like, yeah, but what do you mean? What do you call with real-time, And usually it's like, yeah, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and you're like, well, that's...
it's very hard to do. You have to think about signals, right? How noisy are these signals? And very noisy. Again, I'm sure there are some signals like I've heard TikTok, but even TikTok doesn't do it like real time, because they have to gather enough sample to kind of affect the rate. But I probably we should get somebody from TikTok. I know somebody I can connect you, so he can probably come lean and share.
Man, well, I was thinking about how many different edge cases you'll have too, and it just comes back to this idea that you're over-engineering something that is not going to give you that big of a benefit at the end of the day. So how much time are you going to put into that engineering when the benefit that you get out of it is not related in any way? It's like maybe the benefit is half or a third of the amount of time and effort and energy and resources you push into this, but it's almost like a badge of honor that we can wear and say like, I'm the one who got that real-time shit figured out. And so now I can go give talks all around the world on it.
Yeah, no, I think there are really cool cases in which real-time works. Like, again, don't get me wrong, like pricing and so on is just like, but what ends up happening is that when there is really that need, general purpose infrastructure is not the default choice. Right, is what you realize, because they are very custom. Like everybody has these custom needs. One of the things that we found is a bit surveying and feature survey and all that a long time ago. The really, really big teams said like, hey, we don't want to use this stuff. We want to build our own because we have huge performance requirements. That being said, there are parts of it that do, which is where we put our most efforts in, right? Where we found like back testing or training or collecting data or evaluating and so on is kind of almost always the case, and you need it. But like feature surveying for certain people, it can be very, very hard just because their needs are bespoke. And maybe that will eventually all with ChatGPT, maybe it solves everything and then it brings everything together. But as far as I can tell, not yet.
But how do you balance everything out? Like, because, the community will be like, hey, I want that. And, they'll be like, it's really important for us. Like, if you don't build that, we don't use Flyte. But then it might be something extremely specific as well. So how do you balance those things out?
Oh, this is jumping into community. I think fantastic question. There have been a lot of people actually have come and asked us two things. One is task fusion or running really, really, really fast workflows on Flyte, and some other things are like, another person will ask like really long training jobs which are distributed, get full observability, let's say metrics on it, and I'm going to take these two examples. I think we can do both. Problem is, if I do any of those, anybody who is installing Flyte will hate. This is how it is. They will love it. They want that effect, but it's not going to be easy to install. It's very hard to minimize the total number of dependencies that you can take on a product. And the reason why I want to minimize is because an installation for a large company like LinkedIn, Spotify, and so on, they are able to, right? They have tens of engineers. but a small company has almost no engineers, right? Really, like maybe 3. And if I tell them, now you need Kafka, or you have to go and buy MSK, and they're like, okay, I don't want to introduce this new thing into my stack, right? Literally. Another one would be, into observability, like the fast one. We are bidding. We are. And that's where we started thinking, okay, how do I improve or reduce the surface area of what you need so that maximum people can get value, and that's Flyte. And where can we take away the management overhead for most people? That's how we do a trade-off. We're like, we literally cannot and the thing is, we also want to do it in a very open source site way, because Flyte is part of the Linux Foundation. I don't own it. We don't really go and add hooks in there saying that now it goes to Union Cloud or something. We don't do that.
Ops. You have to immerse yourself in the MLOps content. The best way to do it is to subscribe to the MLOps Community podcast. So, good luck and keep learning.
The way we do it is we listen to a lot of people and we honestly tell them that we agree. Some of this is really cool. Here is an alternative that you guys go and use. And we have actually told that to people. And in some cases, we say it doesn't exist. But they'll want the same versioning and everything with the performance, let's say, of a super fast running task. And we're like, oh, you realized what we have to do. We have to engineer the way the containers start up. We have to bring in hot containers. We have to write certain code that's queuing and some queues, etc., distributed queues. You have to do redirections. You have to hundreds of things underneath, and we can build it, right? I've built this in the past. But will that improve your one use case? Yeah. What about the 95% of the use cases that are there today on the platform, right? That's complexity to them. So that's why we built a plugin architecture and so on, so that we can keep on extending these things. And so eventually we hope that we can release certain things.
In those cases where somebody comes and says, I want this, and then you say, all right, you know what? Actually, it's probably better if you use Airflow 1.10 for that.
Yeah, I think it scales better than 2.0. I'm just joking. Underhanded jab. No.
For everybody out there that is on Airflow 1.10, we feel for you, and you've got yourself into some fun. But before we talk about Airflow 1.10, I did want to stay on this idea of Union versus Flyte for a minute and think about, it seems like you've clearly set aside, hey, we are going to use Flyte for the majority of surface area that we can cover, and we're going to add these plugin models so that we can continue to extend it. And when people come to us in the community and they want new features, they can get that. And whether it's us giving it to them or it's us creating a plugin with another tool that can give it to them, we're going to make sure that that's possible, especially if we hear it more than once or twice in the same day. And then for those really hard jobs that you are thinking about that are going to take a lot of engineering, and you're thinking that companies may not have the resources or the power, the human power to throw at it, but it is a very high quality problem. And if someone could solve that for them, they would be very happy. And so it's worth you creating a managed service around, or it's worth you creating some kind of paid product around it, because that the companies that do have those problems, that don't have the 10s or 20s or 30s, however many engineers to throw at the problem, they're going to be able to say, okay, you know what? We'll give you some money for that.
Yeah. I'll give you another example in that word is almost everybody has asked us, build RBAC into Flyte. Flyte, it ships with SSO. There's an SSO wall of shame. I don't know if you know, by the way. Basically, and we were ourselves using a product, many products, internally at Union, and we are like, oh, I have to pay for enterprise just to get SSO. This is crazy. What world are we living in? And we ship SSO in Flyte, and I've told you this in the past. It causes a lot of I tell the team, like, I don't know why I put it. So because everybody will ask, like, I cannot get Keycloak working. I cannot get Okta, Auth0, Google SSO. And Google SSO, like, is terrible. It doesn't even have an authorization server. Like, people don't realize, so we have to build an authorization server, and that has vulnerability problems, right? Like, because people will not change some of the codes. And we're like, okay, you have to know what you're getting into, right? This is complicated stuff. This is potentially security hazard. And so you should understand what you're getting into and then enable it, right? And that is the reason why we ship with SSO. It's like, you should be secure all the time. But please go and use Okta or something. Like, you just, we can give 2 or 3, but people expect that we can work with every single provider, like Cognito, Azure, LDAP. It's unlimited number of services, right? And then people, most of the folks would say, hey, can we get RBAC? And we're like, there is no standard even for RBAC. There's nothing. Think about the crazy amount of madness that I'll have to go through with this server, even just to support, and it will not be working because you'll have to go and pay this random, providers. And whenever you are facing with such a thing, it's better to go to potentially a hosted service, which knows what they're doing, right? Like, and this is where we can offer, and you guys can create it in open source. That's absolutely open, but it's super hard to explain to the community how they have to enable it. Super hard. It's completely not lack of trying, right? Trust me, it's not lack of trying. It's
But I asked this question already. I've been guilty to ask the airbag question on the Flyte Slack channel.
Not only you, Stephen. It's
I know.
It's everybody. And I'm like, tell me the standard. Let's come up with a standard and then let's build it, right? Like, if there is no standard, how am I going to build it?
Exactly. Yeah, but even like at Volt internally, it's like,
And it doesn't work across, right? Because many people are running in multi-cluster mode. Like, even if you use the Kubernetes OPA kind of stuff, that doesn't work. So I have not found a single solution, but maybe I'm just naive, and this is a community. Please contribute. That's what I say.
PR's open.
Union does ship with RBAC. We know how much work it took just to make RBAC possible. The set of things that we wanted to do was, within a company, there could be a financial infra team. There could be a data infra, ML product, right? And some maybe dealing with very private data, like customer data. You have to keep them secure, and that's where we provide RBAC, and we take it all the way down to a single workflow. And this takes a lot of effort. So it's possible. We know you can do it with Flyte. We just don't know what service. We actually had to connect with some other services, pay them money, do that. We are doing all of that, folks.
And so what are some of these other high-value features that you have incorporated into Union off the back of Flyte, right? That aren't really proper for Flyte because of the engineering work and the amount of time you need to put into it, and also, again, the overhead that you will need to ship Flyte with.
Yes. I'll tell you a bunch, like maybe a non-interest here, but and I'll give you a reason behind each one, which is first time ever, probably open source company is going to say this. But so Flyte supports multi-cluster, but it's not dynamic multi-cluster. You have to configure the clusters, because if you think about it, most people are running a single Kubernetes cluster. And that's why that works for 80% of the cases. And we've tweaked a single cluster to almost the maximum. We know companies that are running hundreds of thousands of workflows an hour, and each of them having hundreds of tasks, so millions of tasks an hour on Flyte, and it works absolutely fine. It scales. Again, in there also we decided to go like a single binary for the absolute beginner, but you can scale out to multiple pieces and so on. But in Union, what we found is that we were talking to users and they're like, I don't get GPUs at AWS. What do I do? Can you give me GPUs? I'm like, I have no GPUs myself, but I know GCP has GPUs, or Oracle Cloud has GPUs, etc. So what we do in Union is you can bring a Kubernetes cluster or any cloud and connect to Union, or within a cloud. And some people are like, hey, we want to separate out different projects, and in GCP or certain things, and all of that is supported out of the box on Union, where you can bring in clusters. Clusters have their life cycle, and you can drain them, etc. Because we inverted the model out of the need. Our first goal was to actually get your Union to work on laptops. And that's what we started. So we had like 4 laptops, and you can connect 4 laptops, and workloads will be sent to 4 laptops dynamically. The second one was, of course, RBAC. I told you the reasons. SSO, we configure the SSO, so you don't have to do the wrong thing because we pay for it. It's not free, but we configure it. Third is another thing that when we were talking to people, we realized everybody wants to get deep visibility into what's happening. Like, let's say you're training a model and you're like, is my GPU getting saturated? Is my CPU getting saturated? Is my memory getting saturated? And so what we call that is task level monitoring. So you can go to an individual task, and in Union, it allows you to dive deep into it, and it gives you all kinds of metrics, like how much storage are you using? Now, if you realize, yes, can this be done in open source? I think people can do it, but you'd have to host a different set of monitoring infrastructure. And this is like, again, I can add it, and people will be like, okay, you're putting Datadog or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So, we don't do Datadog, by the way. But, and the other thing that we realize why this is important to think about is we have not designed APM systems today to solve these problems for ML engineers, data engineers. And I'll tell you how, right? Datadog, Wavefront, all of these APM systems, it's not one, it's almost every one of them, charge based on the cardinality. Cardinality is based on number of metric, unique values of pipelines and experiments are all unique. And at scale in a company, you're running hundreds of or thousands of experiments in a short period of time. And they die away. They go away. They don't exist. But because of the retention policies in the system, you will get charged at the end of the month for every single experiment you ran. And actually, many times, what I said to people is like, I would love to do a business where I am paid for observing you do something. That's APM for me. It just comes and observes you do something, and it's like, all right, here you go, amazing. I'll pay you $60 million. Sadly, I'm not that company. Nobody pays me to do that. But so we thought this is actually a massive problem. So let's solve that. So the TLM is included in Union Cloud for free, and we've designed it in a way that the cost of operating it for us is not enormous. So we can observe individual things at a very, very low cost. The secondary thing is we realize, okay, you do this at an individual level. But when there are platform guys like Stephen, right? He's offering it as a service. He wants to know across his company who is using how many GPUs. And then because, the VP may come and ask like, okay, yesterday we spent $1 million. Can we identify what we did? And is there an ROI for doing it? So you need a top level, like a dashboard. Again, this is observability, so that gets added on it. Like it allows you to drill down by a project, domain, workflow, figure out who is running what, where are you spending? The other interesting thing through our many years we have found is that most people over calculate the amount of memory or CPU, etc. that they need and end up using 50% or lower than that. That is 50% savings on your table. And we show you right off the bat, like, hey, here's a 50% optimization chance. Go change it, and you will see a 50%. Eventually, you will automatically do some of these things, and that's why also we are capturing some of those stuff. Yeah, and so these are 3 features. Along with that, we are working on how, deep lineage and sharing of artifacts, etc. will work. And that's about it. Like we have few other smaller features which we manage everything for you. So we have kind of built, like including, like most people don't get it. You don't have to manage Kubernetes cluster. You don't even have to know you're running a Kubernetes cluster. You don't have to know you're running machines or scaling them. You just tell us, point us to an account, and we manage all of it at any scale. That's our goal.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's actually cool. It's inspiring. Like, especially, like, I felt seeing a couple of times when you were talking, when, you know, like the Datadog observability or like using resources like crazy in a data center. They're like, yeah, I want those 800, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm
Everybody
like, yeah,
wants
sure.
H100s now.
It's like, I want all of them.
Yeah, and doing it uniformly across every cloud, across every deployment is a super hard challenge. And that's what we've been trying to solve. And we're doing it securely, making sure there's no security vulnerabilities. It's a hard challenge. And we think once you start using it, there's no way you're going to go back.
Well, dude, there is one thing that I wanted to finish off with, which is we started, or in the beginning of the conversation, we were talking about how data engineers come with their certain wants for what Flyte offers and how ML engineering is a bit different. I get the feeling since ChatGPT came out, there's a lot of the LLMs that have come out and how that's different than quote unquote classical ML. What have you seen and what do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
There have been folks that I've had a chat with who are like, hey, we are building an LLM infrastructure in it. Why? What do you mean by that? Like, let's break it down. You're taking a model, sure, that's a checkpoint from the past, and you're fine-tuning it. And that's what most people want to do. If you're thinking of fully training a model from scratch, I question whether that's the right thing to do in this day and age where Llama 2 is open source. Unless you have something really found a great insight, which most companies would not have, I would not do such a thing. And then it's mostly fine-tuning. And if you're doing fine-tuning, it's still like training. The hard part is, there are two hard parts here, three parts which are common. Take data. The most important part, take your data and get it into a format that can be used. Because you're going to change the prompt, right? So then send it through the training cycle, update your prompts, or maybe even send to multiple training cycles. You might have to do retraining to answer questions, etc. And then evaluate. You should evaluate before you deploy. And then the final part is deployment, right? And this is LLM infrastructure. Now let's go to classical ML. You get data, train a model, you evaluate, then deploy. So I don't think it differs. The big difference is that LLM models are massive. And so you basically, they are hungry for GPUs. But you should also wonder whether the biggest model is the right model for you. It depends on your problem domain. And I don't know how to prove it, but to try it. So what we do, and we have an Elastic plugin, which essentially allows you to train models on multiple GPUs, could be on one node or multiple nodes. And it uses like the torch run, which is the default that you see everywhere. And it automatically scales it out and so on. And also there are plugins for type, so you can create, PyTorch data loaders and so on, so you can optimally use the GPU. That's what you need. You just need that. There's no way to improve performance of training by putting any kind of cache or anything in between. You have to use raw networks, so the GPUs have to communicate with themselves, then using the best backend like Nickel or MPI, and then communicate with each other if they're on a node, and they have to be placed on. This is all infrastructure orchestration.
Yeah.
And then you want to do a checkpointing. So we did this. That's why we added Hugging Face as an integration with Flyte now. So if you pip install transformers, it has a Flyte callback. Use it. You will be able to get metrics of all the execution as well as checkpointing. So you can just simply say Hugging Face checkpoint. Flyte will automatically checkpoint your code. So you can start using Spot machines if you want to train it. So bring down the cost is consistent. And then recover the training. You can do all of those things, and it's all available. Or you can use Ray. If Ray is what you want to use, you can use Ray. We don't pick a choice. We do not see a massive use of Ray if you're most models can be fine-tuned on like 8 A100s, which is one node. And you put that on one node, the net interconnect is very efficient between them, right? It's on the device. And what you really need to do is you need that TLM, the task level monitoring, to make sure you're saturating your GPU and make sure you're saturating your CPUs on those machines to process. If you do that, you will get the maximum out of your process. But other than that, it's the same stuff, right? And this is what we do for vision models. This is what we do for speech models. This is what we do for classical XGBoost models, right? Like, it doesn't matter. It's the same stuff. Now, yes, there are some special plugins, and they exist.
Yeah, I guess for me, the only thing that is missing there and that I always think makes dealing with large language models a bit different than traditional, quote unquote, traditional ML is the whole prompting.
I think the hardest part is evaluation.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. Those two things, just prompting it and then evaluating it, it's a huge task, and it's not necessarily, I mean, I guess evaluation you could kind of look at as accuracy, but not quite. And so,
yeah. How do you even know?
Yeah.
Let's say even if you hallucinate, how do you know it is hallucinating? Right? You have to, it's like as hard a problem as searching a needle in a haystack, right? Like,
Yeah.
and the haystack here is the internet. Maybe there is some document that says that is right. So that's why your problem domain is interesting, right? You can, if your problem domain is limited, you can evaluate on that problem domain. And I think Hugging Face has been doing some really amazing work on this side, like creating the leaderboard and so on, and it's expensive. They have the money. So it's really, really amazing stuff that they're doing.
Do you think, because I've heard like the consensus being using LLMs to evaluate prompts for your LLMs, do you think it's something that we're going to have more in the future? Like I attended a talk by someone from Google, and they were like, yeah, we tend to use LLMs to evaluate our prompts and everything.
I guess my only thing is probably you need a benchmark still somehow, right? Like if it evaluated once, you create a benchmark almost, I don't know about manually or somehow, which creates that, like it's your golden set.
Yeah.
You say like, is my watermark? If I'm hitting my watermark and improving on it, I'm most likely improving. But again, it's most likely. It's not 100%. And it depends on your application, right? If you are using this to, again, administer loans, don't.
Maybe not.
If you're using this to maybe help somebody in Slack to answer a question, and you're putting a caveat over there that I am a bot, I may be wrong, it's amazing application of it, right? And like whenever what I found is whenever there's a human in the loop, the applications really tend to shy, because this is the promise of ML, and that's what we are doing. We are augmenting a human. We are reducing this stupid stuff that we do, like search and blah, and just give it to you. Like, here's my 4 things. Can you pick one for me? An example, right? And then the human does the job, and based on the context that they already have, which may not be written down. And then I feel. But besides that, going to your original question, I think the infrastructure is still the same. Serving is still the same. There are fantastic work has been done. Like, suddenly I feel quantization is working like really well, and like you can really freeze all of these models and shrink them to work on whatever hardware nowadays. It's amazing.
Well, dude, Ketan, this has been awesome, man. I appreciate every time that you come on here, and today did not disappoint. So I think we're going to end it there, man.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's always fun. And thank you for having Stephen. You get extra brownie points for that.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Mihail Eric. I'm the founder of Pametan Data Innovation and Confetti AI. And this is a quick public service announcement. If you're tired of having nightmares about the machine learning models you have in production, then I encourage you to subscribe to the MLOps Community podcast. It's where all the cool MLOps kids hang out and learn how to tame their ML models.